All right, this last little section, it's not very long, has to do with how can we use death in our life to make what, people a lot of times, they don't want to deal with death because they think, if I think about death, it's going to steal my joy that I have now, because it's going to be like this. It's like this spoiler, the party spoiler is sitting there just kind of waiting to tromp on me, and it's, or the sword of Damocles, for any of you who know that story, and that's going to fall on my head any minute. And so it's death is seen as something like, I can't think about it, I don't want to think about it. And I have one of my other brothers, I got a lot of brothers. And he won't plan his funeral, he won't buy a plot, he won't do anything. His wife keeps saying, come on, honey, we have to do this. No, he just absolutely refuses to do it. This is something from Metropolitan Anthony Bloom, and I'm so glad you're doing his book in February. I highly recommend it. If you all have a chance to read that, I recommend anything you can get by Father Metropolitan Anthony Bloom. He has a lot of stuff on the internet, a lot of his, he didn't write any books, so all of the books that have his name are sermons that have been transcribed for retreats. I highly recommend anything by him. He says, today, too often in our culture, death is seen as the worst thing that can happen. Survival has to be achieved at any cost, often astronomical. My mother was in the hospital about a couple of years ago, and there was this man next to it who was brain dead. And they had so many machines going on and so many people tending to him, it was astounding, for like 4 days. I have no idea what the bill for that was. And then they finally said, yeah, he's brain dead, so they turned the tubes off and he died. When my father was dying, I was reading some prayers. He wasn't Orthodox, but that was okay, I didn't care. I was reading the prayers anyway. And they were not death prayers. I think it was the canon to the Mother of God. And my sister pulls me aside into the bathroom. And she says, don't read those prayers. He'll think he's dying. I said, well, he is. She just couldn't understand why I wanted to think he was dying. He was clearly in his last days. And I think it was a matter of hours, actually, after that conversation. So death is treated as something you can't talk about. People, it's like this whole fear kind of thing. But remembrance of death is, the early Christians, they saw all of life as an ascent towards eternity. And death was simply the door that opened, that allowed us to enter eternity from this life. So death is a decisive moment in which everything we do on earth has come to an end. We're done. Earth is done. Now, paradoxically, what they got out of this was not this heaviness, but this was an encouragement to them to achieve all they could while they were on earth, so that they could become the true person that Christ created them to be. They could reach the fullness of the stature in God that they were created, because each one of us is created by God for certain things. So to refuse to acknowledge that death, it means that we're putting that off. The yearning for perfection, in an interesting way, to refuse to acknowledge we're going to die is to turn off this yearning for perfection. You're always putting it off later. Later I'll do it. So Metropolitan Anthony says that every period of life, we become unable to do what the previous period would have allowed us to do. It is not in our mature years that we can achieve a beautiful and meaningful youth, as it is not in old age that we can reveal to God and to the world what we might have been in our years of maturity. There's a time for all things, but once the time is gone, these things can no longer be done. So this remembrance of death is not practiced in order to give us a fear of life. It's practiced in order to make us live with all the intensity we would have if we were aware that at every moment that could be our last. We had a man die at the monastery about 3 weeks ago, and he was one of the workmen on our construction project. Came to work, he was fine. Had lunch, said, I don't feel very good. Collapsed into the contractor's arms and was gone, like that, instantly. So we live each moment, every single moment of our life, not as Metropolitan Anthony says, not as a trough. Make sure we're not living in this trough of, someday I'll do it, but on the crest of a wave. So not in a defeat, but in a triumph. And by triumph, he means an inner achievement, not a triumph in the sense of I created this great nonprofit organization or whatever it was. Not the outer triumph, But the inner achievement and ability to be perfect and fully what we are, to fulfill God's will and to love others as much as possible at any given moment. You know, how often have all of us had this experience when somebody dies, oh, I wish I'd said this, I wish I'd done that for them. And when that happened with my dad, you know, there I was. Yeah, I wish I talked to him about cremation. I wish I told him there was another option. So I talked to my mother. I did, and we worked that out. And she was really glad that I had showed her that I cared about what happened to her after she died. Because she said, oh, nobody's going to come. The kids aren't going to come to my grave. Well, we are. I am. And so Dostoevsky, he was put up in front of a firing squad. And so the soldiers were there in 15 minutes ready to live. And he got a reprieve. And so somebody said, well, what was it like? And he said, everything was crystal clear. I saw every blade of grass, everything that like the life, there was a fullness of life that he didn't have an experience of. And I had something of an experience of that in 1989. San Francisco had that real big earthquake. Well, I was there, and I was approximately 2 seconds away from having been hit on the head with a huge piece of concrete. And I walked away, and I noticed all these people looking at me. And I turned around, and there on the ground was this huge piece of concrete that had broken off a building 2 stories high above my head. And I think with my guardian angel, I was working on that one real hard. And the next couple of days, after a big earthquake, there's always aftershocks. And we had a lot of aftershocks and some pretty intense ones. And every time you just, and I had that experience of life being, I was like, I could have been dead. I could be dead now. And I really wish I could hold on to that. I couldn't. You know, life just kind of went on, and so you can't. It's hard to live in that kind of intensity. One of our sisters just came home from her father dying, and you know it's going to fade away. But it does, and that might be a real gift from God in some ways. But so death. If we look at death in this way, the remembrance of it seems to be the only power that can make life really intense. Make give it that life that. An intensity and a sparkle and a reality and a beauty too. So God asks us to live knowing that simultaneously death is the last enemy to be conquered. That is a monstrous thing. It's really an awful thing. It's a horrible thing that can happen. There's nothing good about it. We don't have to make believe that death is good. It's not. But we can also, at the same time, recognize that it's a gate, and it's a gate that allows us to escape the vicious circle that comes from being apart from God. Because now we can't see God face to face. You know, St. Paul says that, now I see through a veil darkly, but then I'll see face to face. Because now in this body where we're at now, we're living in that body of sin. We're slaves to that. And death is the gateway that's going to allow us to leave that, to get out of that, and to live fully and really totally fully in that joy in the presence of Christ. Death, God uses death to shorten that pain of this present life. But because of the resurrection, death is no longer the last word. Dr. Paul and Anthony says, death is the moment and way in which, however separate, however incompletely united, or in harmony with God we may have been, we present ourselves before His face. So to prepare for death, and I mean prepare in all sorts of ways, literally for death, my mother has done a pre-planned funeral. She's picked out her hymns, and she's Catholic, and all that, and she's got the coffin picked, all that kind of stuff, and to me it's a gift. It's just a total gift that she's done that, and I know I'm going to do what she wants. I don't have to think about it. She dies, I don't have to scramble. I can just pull out those sheets of paper and go, okay, this is what it is. We're going to do it. It's a wonderful gift to give to somebody to do that. So it means to come to prepare for death in those kind of very practical ways, but it also means every day continually to come to make peace with yourself to make peace with other people. So it's this constant reconciling to yourself and to other people, so that, as the psalm says, never let the sun go down on your anger. To come to peace with yourself, your circumstances, with your present, your past. Our life is not, sometimes we see our life as sort of a gradual decay and a descent towards death. And now, I just turned 63, and so sometimes it's like, you know, I'll go out to exercise, and exercise isn't all that much fun anymore. It's just like staving off old age. So there is a certain amount of that. But really, that's not how we want to end our life. It's just kind of this decay and descent into nothingness. But we want to have it rather be an ascent into eternity. So death becomes this narrow gate. And by narrow gate, I mean a small step. It's just a small step to walk over. When we've done all the homework, we've done everything we need to do, we're in right relationship with God, in right relationship with everyone else. And then when we step over that gateway, then the clothing that Christ wants us to wear for all eternity will be there for us. We can put it on. So that's what I have to say to you tonight. So thank you for all your good